Hi, everyone. This is my first time learning about Workbench, so thank you again so much for having me. I'm Natasha. I'm founder and CEO of a company called EON, and we work with brands and retailers on digital identity. So before founding EON, I used to work for a startup called Delos, and we worked in smart and connected urbanism, basically looking at new standards for how to design interconnected cities. And through that work, I became super, obsessed with this idea of how to actually connect the physical world to the digital world, and all of the challenges associated with that at a macro level. We got a lot going on. And basically, all the complexities of how you actually connect a physical product to the digital world and the roadblocks there. And so through that work, I actually started to research around this concept of digital identity, and that if every single product had a unique digital ID, you could connect the entire value chain. And so a lot of our work around smart and connected cities would actually be possible because our physical products in the world around us would have an identity. And so that 2 years ago became the foundation for starting EON. Today, we're the leading digital identity company for fashion, apparel, and retail, working with brands like H&M, PVH, Target, technology partners from Microsoft, SAP, and GS1, and our go-to-market strategy with groups like Accenture and IDEO. And so our mission at EON is to use this digital identity to power connectivity, not just from production to point of sale, but all the way through the entire value chain, and using that digital ID to power circular economy. So what's exciting is that we are on the threshold of a digital identity revolution, right? It's not too far away or hard to imagine, and we're headed there, a world where all of the products around us and the people around us have a digital twin, or a digital double, or a digital ID. And so before we get too excited about that digital ID revolution, I guess let's just back up into what is a digital identity. So digital identity is a double of a product, right? And so today in the value chain, brands and retailers use things like RFID or barcodes to identify their products. And so those are very simple identifiers, and I'd say we're moving to 80% of retailers having item level RFID. There's no actual data associated. It's just an arbitrary number for that product. So what we do at EON is we actually use that number as a basis to trigger a unique web location, to basically generate what you could think of as a product birth certificate, a data location associated and accessible through that number identification trigger. And now that you have an ID location, you can also, and what we support is actually generating data based on that ID. So all of the interactions now with that product can be associated back to that ID. So all of those things together are your product's digital ID. Your identifier, your birth certificate, your passport. So now you've just gone from having this very simple product to a data generating asset with your own items. And so we introduced the first IoT digital identity platform that powers that end-to-end connectivity across fashion, apparel, and retail as our initial focus. And so this isn't an arbitrary digital identity platform. We actually collaborated with GS1, if any one of you knows GS1. GS1 is basically the group that assigns every company their barcode and their RFID number. So it's how do you actually, on a standard level across every single product in the world, identify products and create a unique web location for that asset. And so now it's possible from a data generating perspective to have data about your asset at every stage in the product lifecycle. And so to make this a little bit simple, you could kind of think of us as a sales force for physical products. I know people like those kind of comparisons. So what does this actually mean for the business? So if you are, digital identity ultimately becomes the backbone of your entire business, because your business is to sell a product, right? So whether you're in supply chain and you're using your digital identity for visibility, transparency, logistics and distribution, authenticity, counterfeit, supply-demand matching, Or whether you're in the retail department of an organization and you're using digital ID to power your omnichannel strategy, your inventory management, your merchandising and your store layout, your return management of those products coming back in. Or whether you're in the marketing and customer engagement department and you're using this for personalization and product storytelling. In terms of business model innovation, the digital identity actually is an essential backbone for all of those. So whether you're launching a rental business and all of the logistics associated with the ongoing management of that asset, whether you're launching a subscription model, whether you're supporting resale and re-commerce and actually need to identify those products coming back in to be resold and authenticate them, and projects that we're working on now with large retailers on the next gen of the digital wardrobe. And then this is where we get back to our core reason around why we find this technology to be empowering is the fact that digital identity actually unlocks all of the transparency throughout the value chain from production to point of sale and also long after. So digital ID will actually be the way that we reuse products, the way that we recycle products. You can actually scan the product and access the material content. For textiles, this is going to nerd out for a second, but for textiles, that's absolutely essential because you need to know everything down to the dye process, the materials, the components. So digital identity at a policy level is also being looked at as a global framework to identify and recycle and reuse materials. So what do we do from kind of a back-end perspective? So today you have your value chain. It's very fragmented and your products aren't intelligent. So you have various applications throughout the value chain. If you're a brand, you have a PLM and an ERP and a warehouse management system. And all of that data sits within a specific application silo. And a lot of the brands actually use tools like Excel or Slack to communicate within the company about their products. And so what we do is we create a single source of product truth. So now, instead of your data sitting within various siloed applications across the value chain, you have one central source of product data truth that's able to communicate across stakeholders in the value chain. So as we move into a world where the value chain becomes more omni-channel, more responsive, more circular, and more interconnected, this digital identity ultimately becomes the backbone of the way to communicate about the physical product at every stage in the value chain. And you see this, I'll focus on the circular economy application in this presentation, but you see this happening today, right? So today you have brands making products, and now you have all of this business model innovation happening, right? The RealReal, which introduces itself as an IoT company, or ThreadUp, or a Vestiaire Collective or Le Tote. And you can think of the digital identity ultimately as the glue that enables the original brand to actually access data about all of those things within the second market and bring that intelligence back, or own the second market and communicate to those stakeholders through the physical product. So for example, if you're a VF group and you launched a Rewarn program, and the Rewarn stakeholder can receive that product and ID it. That process today to re-commerce usually takes about 25 minutes per product because you have to manually type in all of that content. So as you can see, it's not enough in the complicated world that we're moving toward of circular economy to have a digital identity that just communicates within your own organization, right, within your own company. You actually have to design a digital ID to communicate externally to partners, to manufacturers, to shipping partners, to re-commerce partners, to recyclers. And so how does your product communicate? Because that's actually the basis of what makes a smart and connected product. If it can't communicate to all those stakeholders, you're not receiving the benefit of connectivity. So to that end, we are launching, in partnership with all of those brands and stakeholders that you saw before, something called the Global Connect Fashion Initiative, where we're creating the industry-wide standard for digital identity to unlock all of that communication at every stage in the value chain through the physical product, through a core data architecture that the industry is collaborating to develop and agree upon. And so this gets to be rather meaningful when you look at the future of consumption patterns, and also very exciting from a data perspective when you look at actually mapping this digital ID to customer ID and the intersections and opportunities there. So our story is we were founded in 2017. or I guess 2017, 2018. We'll go into that later. Then we're on track right now. We're doing about 7 major pilots with leading global brands, all the way from fast fashion to luxury, because digital identity, you use it for something different, but all different types of brands, retailers, and manufacturers will use it. And then, sorry guys. And then in 2020, we'll be opening the platform to industry to scale and using that digital identity Connect Fashion standard to do so. So we power digital transformation for brands. Our business model is a SaaS structure, but we also actually monetize the data and the interactions with that product across the life cycle. And then all of our pilots are paid, and our brands are really dedicated to this kind of pre-competitive collaboration around the ID as well. So our team is from retail, tech, and what's exciting and where we see this is actually going beyond fashion, apparel, and retail to actually creating a global framework for digital ID in a world where every product has a circular ID and is able to connect across the value chain. So that's me, and thank you so much.
So I'm curious, brands usually reach out to wholesalers, warehouses. So there are like 3-4 parties before it goes to buyers. There are times when brands sell out to flea markets where they go scanning actually. So the initial scanning from brands will be in warehouses. So how would you get to the 4th point of seller where you already interact through 2 other parties? How does this, when do you activate it on the
Yeah, so how do you scan a product?
No, initial scan happens the whole seller. That's brands will sell to us directly. It has a chain going through, so it will take time for every party to go through. So initial scan will be done by wholesaler when they buy from brands. So how do you get the technology that actually the seller is the one buying and his information is coming out, the wholesaler's information is coming through?
Yeah, so we see a lot of the brands and their wholesale or retail partners actually, the retailers are often the ones that will demand, or the wholesalers, that the brands actually provide an RFID. So they oftentimes have a lot of the RFID infrastructure in place to capture that. Because it benefits them. Like Amazon will mandate that you item level RFID tag. So we see a lot of from production to point of sale, a lot of the RFID infrastructure exists already to kind of register those scans that I think you're describing, but there's no data feedback loop necessarily to the brand. So that's where we can use the digital ID to support the communication between the brand or the wholesaler and the brand and the retailer. And then after point of sale, this is a whole new kind of technology ecosystem. So for example, H&M is partnered with Renewal Workshop and ICO to run their take back and repair programs. And now we're looking at how to design the infrastructure for that from an IoT perspective so that those products that are coming back in, millions and millions of them can be scanned and identified instantly.
Another question.
So it sounds like your platform sort of sits in the middle of several giant, huge software, like PLM, ERP, right? So this isn't sort of like you kind of just come in and stick your software in. You have to lift and shift an entire software ecosystem that's essential to doing business instead of messed up. So how do you do that?
Well,
So the question, lift
so
and shift, hard. How do you do it?
Yeah, complicated ecosystem. So that's where some of our so first of all, we only at this stage work with large global brands because it is such a heavy investment on our side. And that's only where it's worthwhile, and only for them where it's worthwhile in terms of the investment. So we kind of go for like-minded brands. So like a lot of the brands now have the thesis that every product will need a digital ID. And so those that are at that level of thinking, we come in, and our relationship with them is very much a partnership of building this. And so that's also why there's kind of this movement aspect to our work of the Connect Fashion initiative, which we're sort of using as a kind of marketing tool, I guess, to drive overall industry awareness of the platform solution and the need for an ID. But in terms of the overall pilot structure, it is complicated, and because it's also cross-department. So it's the sustainability team and the ERP management team, but A lot of it is actually repeats, so it's all on SAP or it's all on the same ERP system. So now that we've gotten our bearings in a few of those major ones, it should be getting easier, I hope.
I see some fast hands over there in your hat,
Sorry.
in the green hat.
Okay, great. I think that's a really fascinating idea. One question that I have is around product granularity. So some products can be kind of dismantled, like I'm thinking like IKEA, for example. How do you deal with something that is a product as a whole, but then there are individual parts to it? And so, especially with IKEA, you could rearrange them, and then now you kind of have like this, this chimera of a different product. Like, how do you deal with that in terms of your system?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that we love. So a next avenue that we see is also furniture for us. So for apparel, it kind of, we're in this place where the data gets put in now, right? But what we see is that in the future, the product's ID will actually be generated over time. Does that shift make sense? So it's like, now we just pull data in from like a ERP system, and that formulates the product's ID, and it has the different components. But ultimately what we see happening is sort of like as the product is actually getting manufactured, those IDs basically come together. So you have a button that has an ID and it gets put in, and then you have the thread that has an ID and it gets put in. So it goes from being this sort of process of automating the composite creation to actually having it be generated in real time.
So you're not envisioning like an RFID on every specific piece. It's being allocated during manufacturing, and then you're just recording like a digital.
Exactly. So right now for apparel, you would only put one RFID on one product. For a piece of furniture, you maybe have different components, and as companies like IKEA look to launch like rental businesses and service businesses, those IDs will probably be used more and more, because then you can actually at a component level identify the different parts and what piece is missing and instantly scan and make sure you have all the structures. So I definitely see it becoming more granular.
All right, one last very fast question, and then we're going to move on to the panel. How do you license it?
Our platform? So we do it at an annual fee, a combination of per digital ID and the data storage associated.
Great question. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Natasha of EON Group. And now